And we have Shubhaboy Bhattacharjee, senior economic journalist, joining us live from Sri Lanka right now to decode the IMF data. Thank you very much, sir. So first things first, very quickly, what according to you are the big takeaways of this IMF data or the observations, especially the whole peg of GDP of India doubling in a decade?
Well, that doesn't take too much of surprise to me. The reason for that is because, if you look at the way the Indian economy has been performing, this is a consistent projection. I mean, the RBI, the IMF data doesn't say anything which is out of what should we say, different from our estimates. It comes along because the agency which is saying it, which is that IMF. But if you look at overall the way the Indian economy has been consistently been performing, if you look at the CSO data, which has been released recently, the first advance estimates, the revisions of the GDP data for the years before on upside, it essentially shows that the Indian economy is doing rather well.
Having said that, how do you see the whole PLI as a game-changing factor or a game changer, giving much needed fillip to the manufacturing sector or the manufacturing prowess and also ramping up exports, the role of PLI?
No, actually, it's not, I would say it's not just the PLI, it's the entire range of government policies, which have been consistently infrastructure capex oriented. What the major thing that we should look at is that in the last, say about 5 years, slightly more than that, the India government has pushed an enormous amount of money into for capex. So we are now something averaging above 3% of GDP onto our capex. Now that is a very big number for the government to have committed. And it has done so by keeping its revenue expenditure under constraint, which is very necessary. It has kept its fiscal deficit absolutely on target. It has kept inflation management on a tight leash. So, there are lots of things, including PLI, which have been done to ensure that the Indian economy keeps it's, as you say, pushing up ahead. And we expect that by 2027, 2028, India will be the at least the fourth largest economy, if not the third largest economy in the world. Yeah.
Having said that, the report also, Shubhaboy, puts India ahead of Japan, overtaking Japan and becoming the fourth largest economy, right? You just pointed out, as the latter's GDP grew nil in the past decade. How do you see this comparison?
That's the point. I mean, if you look at all the data indicators, there are a couple of things that we need to look at. First of all, is there the short-term fluctuations. Now, those short-term fluctuations will happen. They happen due to lots of factors. Right now, for instance, the World Trade Management is sort of getting a reset. We're also facing supply-side shocks from lots of reasons. For instance, even something like the Panama Canal drought. Now, that's not something on which we can have a hand on, and we can't do anything much. So those fluctuations will be there. But overall, when you look at the growth trajectory that the government has pushed, if you also look at the way the policies have been harnessed, in fact, I recently wrote about the fact that how airports across northern India, right from Jewar Airport, which is to be inaugurated very soon in April or May, going on to already add to capacities like the Ayodhya Airport, going further down in West Bengal or in Bihar. These are major airports coming up, and they are changing the nature of connectivity across the Gangetic Basin. Now, those are huge changes. Add to that the changes like what has been done, for instance, in the RRTS, the regional rapid transport systems. We already have the Delhi-Meerut connection in place. There are more planned which are towards Panipat. So these would be very significant changes of how the economy performs and behaves. Yes.
Yes. So what reasons do you attribute to India's GDP rising significantly? The numbers that the data talks about in 2025, it talks about the highest inflation adjustment growth of 105%. Now, here I want to understand from you this whole comparative analysis among the top 14 countries, which the report says India is surpassing not only Japan, but US, China and Germany as well.
No, Sakal, that's exactly what I was saying, that, you have to look at these individual pieces that have been put into place, like the connectivity of the airlines, the connectivity through the airports. Now, that's a very major thing that has been done. You're saying about what is the reason why India is consistently outperforming. Now, these sort of these outperformances are not just numbers. They should be seen by developments on the ground. So as I said, the connectivity created through the airports, the connectivity being created through the RRTS. The RRTS is doing two things. For instance, it is not only transporting passengers, it is also a major infrastructure creation. So both lead to substantial addition to the GDP muscle of the country. Simultaneously, if you look at the similar sort of connectivity projects which are happening in other parts of India, then you realize that why is it that these numbers are leaping up. So the numbers, so it's not fair to just look at the numbers. You have to look at the numbers as to how these numbers are being made up. What is making up these numbers? So the making up of these numbers comes from, as I said, the consistent investment in infrastructure, which means a large amount of capex. We already we had a national infrastructure pipeline which was projected in 2019 that we will do $100 billion. $100 billion. We have already exceeded it by handsome margin. If you look at the national investment grid, that has been, if you look at the numbers there. So those are what is changing the GDP in a very progressive, in a very in the ways that you are getting to see the project, and that is what is also showing up in terms of the anticipated rise in the GDP in future.
Yes. Yeah, that exactly was my final question, since you talked about the anticipated GDP rise in near future. Having said that, Shubha, to your understanding, how does the future economic outlook look like, considering the key indicators that you talked about, which are contributing in a big way as far as this upward trajectory is concerned?
Yeah, that's it. Like, these are not short-term things. These are consistently long-term measures which are being pushed into place. And they initially took time to show up, but now one by one, as they are coming up in large numbers across different sectors, roads is very big. We are looking at now beneficial changes developing in the railways. Look at the way that we handled, for instance, the transport requirements, the logistic requirements of the Kumbh Mela. Now, those are the sort of things that they took time. They didn't happen suddenly.
Correct.
And once they have started happening, they will naturally be the ones which will push the economy substantially higher, because they couldn't have been created suddenly. They have come up gradually in a very big measure, targeted through targeted government policies. And because they are in place, they will in turn be useful and be the ones which will keep the GDP momentum continuing.
Absolutely. Government's proactive economic policies, bold structural reforms, sustained focus on ease of doing business, all of this pushing India consistently, if I'm allowed to use the word, amongst the top world economies. Shubha, thank you very much for joining us and taking out time. You're there in Sri Lanka, but thank you for joining us on National Broadcaster on this big story of the evening. Thank you.